Try to remember your first birthday. Try harder. Nothing comes back, does it? Somewhere in your house right now, there might be a photo of you turning 1, smiling, cake smeared across your face. You have no memory of it. None. But the real answer for why is far stranger than you were just too young. You lived through thousands of hours before the age of 3. You learned to walk. You learned to talk. You felt hunger, fear, comfort, and joy over and over every single day. And yet, almost none of it survived. Somewhere between the ages of 3 and 7, that entire library of experience quietly vanished. Scientists have a name for this. They call it infantile amnesia. Sigmund Freud noticed it more than a century ago. He couldn't explain why his patients could recall almost nothing before age 6 or 7. He guessed it was repression, memories buried because they were too disturbing to keep. He was wrong about the reason, but he was right that something real was happening, something universal. Here's what makes it strange: babies are not blank. Newborns recognize their mother's voice within days. Infants can remember a toy hidden under a blanket, and researchers have shown babies as young as 6 months can retain the memory of a specific action for weeks. Their brains are constantly recording. So the problem isn't that babies fail to form memories. The problem is what happens to those memories later. Where do they go? This is the part most people get backwards. It feels intuitive to assume a baby's brain is simply too undeveloped to bother making memories in the first place, like a camera without film. But that image is wrong. The film is running. The footage is being shot frame by frame every single day of infancy. What's missing isn't the recording, it's the archive. Psychologist Carol Peterson at Memorial University spent years studying this exact question. She interviewed young children about their earliest memories, then went back years later and asked them again. The results were unsettling. Many of the memories the children had described in detail simply disappeared by the time they were teenagers. Not faded, gone, replaced by nothing. The children were confident they remembered other things instead, events they had actually forgotten. Years earlier were quietly swapped out and never missed. What made Peterson's study so convincing was how confident the children remained. They weren't hesitant about the memories that had actually vanished. They were sure. They described events with detail and emotion, fully believing those details were real, when in fact, those very memories were the ones about to disappear within a few years. Confidence had nothing to do with permanence. A memory could feel completely solid and still be scheduled for deletion. So your brain isn't just failing to store early memories, it's actively erasing them on a rolling basis for years. Why would evolution build a mind that does that? The answer starts in a part of your brain called the hippocampus. Think of it as your brain's filing cabinet, the part responsible for turning a raw experience into a memory you can pull up later. In a newborn, that filing cabinet isn't finished being built. It's still growing new cells at an enormous rate, a process called neurogenesis. New neurons flood in, wiring and rewiring the whole structure. Neuroscientist Paul Franklin at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto ran an experiment that reframed this whole mystery. He raised young mice and let them form memories, then measured how fast those mice were losing them. The mice with the highest rate of new brain cell growth forgot the fastest. When Franklin artificially boosted neurogenesis in adult mice, their older memories vanished too. When he slowed it down in young mice, they held onto memories they should have lost. Here's the part that changes everything. The forgetting isn't a bug, it's construction. Every new neuron that gets wired into the hippocampus has to connect somewhere, And sometimes it connects by overriding the wiring an old memory was using. Your brain isn't losing your first steps because it's careless. It's losing them because it's busy building the machinery that will let you remember everything else for the rest of your life. Doesn't that flip the whole story? You didn't lose your earliest years by accident. You lost them as the price of admission for having a functioning memory system at all. There's a second piece to this puzzle, and it isn't just about brain cells, it's about language. Psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University has spent decades studying how memory develops in young children, and her research points to something surprising. A memory isn't just stored, it's organized. And a huge part of that organizing happens through narrative, through the ability to tell yourself and others what happened. A 2 year old doesn't have the words yet to build a story out of an event. No beginning, middle, and end. No sense of this happened, then that happened, and it mattered because. Without that narrative scaffolding, an experience has nowhere stable to live. It's like trying to save a file with no folder to put it in. The experience happened, the brain recorded it in the moment, but without language to give it shape, there's nothing holding it together for the long term. This is why your parents can often describe your third birthday in perfect detail while you remember nothing. They already had the narrative tools. You didn't. The event was identical, the storage system was not. Put those two forces together, the hippocampus still under construction and language still too immature to build a lasting story, and infantile amnesia stops looking like a mystery. It starts looking almost inevitable. But there's a third piece, and it might be the strangest one. The age at which your earliest memory begins isn't the same everywhere on Earth. Researchers comparing memory, recall across different cultures, found something that shouldn't happen if this were purely a matter of biology. Adults from cultures that emphasize detailed personal storytelling, where parents ask children what happened and then what happened and how did you feel, tend to report earliest memories from a younger age. Adults from cultures that emphasize group experience over individual narrative tend to report their earliest memories starting later, sometimes by a year or more. Think about what that means. If infantile amnesia were only about hippocampus construction, every human brain on the planet should hit the same wall at roughly the same age. It doesn't. The wall moves depending on how much a child is taught to turn experience into story. Biology built the filing cabinet. Culture decided how many folders you got to keep. So the years you can't remember weren't sealed off the moment they happened. They were still being fought for, sentence by sentence, every time an adult in your life asked you to describe your day. Here's the twist that should really stop you. This isn't something that only happened to you once, back when you were small. Your hippocampus never stops making new neurons. Not completely. Not even now. Neurogenesis slows dramatically after childhood, but recent research suggests it continues at a much lower rate throughout your entire life, which means the same basic mechanism that erased your infancy is, in a much smaller way, still quietly running in the background of your mind today. Think about how much of last year you can actually recall in detail, not the highlights, the ordinary Tuesdays, the forgettable errands. Most of it is already gone, filed away in the same slow, invisible process that once wiped your first 3 years clean. So, why does any of this matter to you now? Scrolling through your phone, decades removed from your own infancy, because it reframes something you've probably felt but never quite named. That quiet frustration when you try to picture your childhood home and only get fragments. That strange sensation of watching old home videos of yourself and feeling like you're watching a stranger. You're not broken. You're not failing to hold on to something you should have kept. You're looking at the normal cost of having a brain built to keep learning. Every memory you make today is, in a sense, borrowed space. Your brain is still under construction, just less dramatically than it was at 18 months old. It is still trading some of yesterday to make room for tomorrow. The years you can't remember weren't stolen from you, they were spent deliberately so that everything after them could be remembered at all. This is also why the memories you do keep from early childhood feel so strange when you examine them closely. Ask yourself what your single earliest memory actually is. For most people, it isn't a whole scene, it's a fragment: the smell of a specific room, the color of a blanket, a single sentence someone said, disconnected from everything around it. Patricia Bauer's research suggests these surviving fragments aren't the most important moments of your early life. They're just the ones that happen to get caught by language right as it was coming online, small accidents of timing rather than curated highlights. The moment your brain finally had enough narrative structure to hold on to something, it grabbed whatever was passing by. That's why your first memory might be something as forgettable as a doorway, and not the day you learned to walk. Think about what that does to the story you tell about your own childhood. You've probably assumed your earliest memories are the ones that mattered most. They aren't. They're the ones that survived a construction site. Everything else, years of laughter, fear, comfort, and discovery, was just as real and just as intense. And none of it made the cut. Not because it didn't matter, but because the equipment to keep it wasn't finished yet. Next time someone hands you a baby photo you don't recognize as yourself, you might feel that same instinct to mourn what's missing. Don't. That blank space in your memory isn't an absence, it's evidence. Evidence of a mind that was working exactly as it should, tearing down what it didn't need yet so it could build the version of you that remembers everything else. And it's still happening. Right now, somewhere in your hippocampus, new neurons are wiring themselves in, quietly nudging aside a little bit of last month to make room for whatever you learn tomorrow. You'll never notice the moment it happens. You never did before either. Try to remember your first birthday again. You still can't. And now you know that's not a loss. It's proof your mind was already doing its most important job.